Hey guys, Elon Musk just had two really big interviews with Bloomberg and CNBC. We're going to cut those up and give you just a very important information that is in those interviews. We'll put that at the beginning of the video. And at the end, I'm going to react to everything that was said.
Are you going to have full autonomous on the roads of Austin by the end of June?
Yes.
You are. What gives you that confidence?
We have cars driving 24/7 with drivers in the cars, and we see essentially no interventions. So we want to be very careful with the first introduction of unsupervised full self-driving, meaning that the car's driving around with no one in it. So we're going
no one behind, but drivers.
Well, yes, and sometimes no one in it at all. It's going to pick someone up. The car seems to be incredibly safe. So we have thousands of cars that are being tested, which is creating some strange situations where we just drive. There's just a bizarre number of Teslas driving past people's houses. They're like, what's going on?
We even saw one last night coming from the airport, driving at night alone. Looked very lonely.
Yeah, it's looking good for Austin next month.
Yeah, you know, some estimates have been that you're only going to have 10 to 12 of them on the road initially. I mean, it's going to be a very small amount. Is that correct?
Yeah.
How do you see it ramping up?
Well, we'll have to see how well it does. But, you know, I think it's prudent for us to start with a small number, confirm that things are going well, and then scale it up proportionate to how well we see it's doing.
Right. And what's going to be a judge of how well it's doing?
Are there any incidents? Are there any interventions? But we want to deliberately take it slow. I mean, we start with 1,000 or 10,000 on day one, but I don't think that would be prudent. So we'll start with probably 10 for a week, then increase it to 20, 30, 40. And I think by, say, we'll probably be at 1,000 within a few months. And then we'll expand to other cities, so expand to San Francisco, California, Los Angeles, San Antonio.
Is that a real possibility in the not too distant future? I mean, Texas is very different than California when it comes to regulation. They don't really have much here in terms of dealing with autonomous, but it's a different story in California.
California's already approved. Waymo has been doing autonomous driving in California for a while. Right now, the approval process is very haphazard and sort of state by state and sometimes city by city.
We were talking to the Secretary of Transportation about that very fact a moment ago.
It's going to be important to have a unified set of national regulations for self-driving cars. Otherwise, you're going to get into this weird situation where if you're driving from Maine to New York, you're going to go through 10 different sets of regulations. Cars are going to behave differently. It's not going to make any sense.
No.
So one set of regulations that, just like there is for highway driving, that's what I think makes sense for the country as a whole. My prediction is that probably by the end of next year, we'll have probably hundreds of thousands, if not over 1 million Teslas doing self-driving in the U.S.
What percentage of those are going to be, well, not the cybercab, you're just talking about on full self-driving, level 4?
Unsupervised full self-driving,
right.
You do not need to pay attention.
Right. For me, if I own a Tesla and I have the software and the capability of doing it.
Yes.
Right.
We'll have a model which is kind of like some combination of Uber and Airbnb. So if you're a Tesla owner, you'll be able to add or subtract your car to the fleet. But just like an Airbnb, you could rent out your spare bedroom or rent out your house when you're not using it. And the same thing will be available for Tesla owners. So it's a way for Tesla owners to earn revenue. Instead of having your car sit in the parking lot, your car could be earning money.
You and I talked about that a couple of years ago. Somewhat ambitious target. Why do you have the confidence now that in a year there'll be 1 million available?
Well, by the end of next year. So it's just more like 18 months.
26, okay.
Yeah, once you have a proof point, once you have it working, then scaling up is just a matter of time. But once it's working well in Austin, then we'll make sure it works well in other cities. I mean, there are obviously some unique cases like downtown New York, but that's a highly unusual situation. Most cities in America are like Austin.
Although you can go on full self-driving right now in New York. I mean, you can obviously have to sit there behind the wheel, and it'll do it.
Oh yeah, no,
it'll navigate the traffic. I've seen it.
Yes, so even a Tesla that you buy right now, and the self-driving just costs $9 a month, will give you autonomous driving anywhere in the country right now. The question is, when is it unsupervised?
Where you're sitting in the back, so to speak.
Yes, where you're like asleep and the car, you wake up at your destination. Yeah. In order for that to be the case, we want the autonomous car to be much safer than a car driven by a person.
Right. But, you know, again, I'll come to Waymo because even though they only have about 700 cars, they obviously are on the market. They're in Beverly Hills all over the place.
It's proof of concept.
They've got 28 cameras. They've got LiDAR and radar. You've had a different approach. The 8 to 9 cameras and the neural network. Why do you feel that is going to be the equivalent in terms of safety profile?
Oh, I think it'll be better.
Why?
Because the way that the road system is designed is for intelligence, biological neural net, and eyes. That's how the whole road system is designed. So what will actually work best for the road system is artificial intelligence digital neural nets and cameras. And we also have the microphones to hear emergency vehicles and that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. You need to hear a fire engine or a police car.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
But that's how the whole road system is designed. It's not designed for shooting lasers out of your eyes. And what we found is that when you have multiple sensors, they tend to get confused. So do you believe the camera or do you believe the LiDAR? If you get confused, that's what can lead to accidents. So we used to have, for example, radar in the car, but we found that the radar and the camera would sometimes disagree, and then you don't know which one to believe.
So it wasn't about expense. Are you seeing the data right?
In fact, we turned off the radars in the cars.
You turned off the radar.
Yeah.
So if I were to say to you, all right, let's go, you think that you're there in terms of the safety profile you're seeing right now?
Yeah, we could take a ride today if you want. Sure.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to take a ride with you anytime you want, wherever you want. Logistics capability to operate sort of a ride-hailing fleet at scale, because you mentioned, obviously, let's call it the end of 26. Are you going to have an app? Are you there? Do you have that ability?
I think we can figure out an app. Somebody tells me.
You're not worried about it?
But Tesla already has an app.
Yeah, I know. XAI can probably do it for you in like an hour.
Tesla can apps just fine.
Do you ever consider licensing the technology
Yes.
at some point?
Yes, there are a number of major automakers that have talked to us about licensing self-driving, and we're very much open to that. I think the more we demonstrate the capability of self-driving, the more that they will want to license it, and we're happy to help.
You know, back to the safety profile, because it's going to obviously be something, a key focus. I saw this over the weekend. They did a test between Waymo and Tesla.
It's not a real publication.
Regardless of whether
fake.
we want to have a debate about their journalistic integrity. The test itself, let me just share it with you and get your reaction, which was the Waymo, ultimately they said proved better, in part only because it avoided, with its geofencing, one very difficult intersection that the Tesla chose to go through. It stopped at a red light, but then it went through the red light. What's your reaction?
Look, I'm not going to comment on some Business Insider article.
But is that a concern at all? Because in a way, there's no geofencing, so it's like it's happy to go on the highways in a way that perhaps a Waymo is not. I guess my question is that a concern at all for you in terms of it encountering things that are still sort of a crucial test and perhaps it fails?
No, first of all, that actually should have been a test of supervised self-driving and not unsupervised self-driving. So the assumption there is that you have a person who is going to take over.
Right.
So their test made no sense.
Okay.
But when we deploy the cars in Austin, we are actually going to deploy it not to the entire Austin region, but only the parts of Austin that we consider to be the safest. So we will geofence it. Yeah, of course.
Right.
It's not going to take intersections unless we are highly confident it'll just take a route around that intersection.
But there won't be a safety driver in the car.
Correct.
Right. The car, there's not going to be somebody sitting there. But you did have ads for vehicle operator autopilots. What was that about then? Are there going to be people who are remotely sort of monitoring the performance of the fleet?
Yeah.
And what will they do?
So they'll just we're going to be extremely paranoid about the deployment, as we should be. It would be foolish not to be. We'll be watching what the cars are doing very carefully. As confidence grows, less of that will be needed.
Again, you spoke about it, and we spoke about it a couple of years ago. And obviously, your investor base, many of whom are watching right now, are interested in the revenue and profitability of this ride-hailing autopilot and autonomous driving opportunity. BYD, I believe at this point in China, is now offering levels of autonomy for free. I mean, are you confident you're going to be in a position to continue to get a premium for that particular level?
Well, interestingly, in China, we're not allowed to train on videos in China. So when we released Full Self-Driving, it was actually just trained on the rest of the world, but not in China. Mm-hmm. And the tests by local Chinese publications, I think, concluded that even without training on local Chinese roads, the Tesla self-driving was the best.
It was the best.
Yes.
But again, I mean, is the technology...
In fact, there's some pretty wild videos where people are doing self-driving, which we don't recommend, obviously, on narrow mountain roads, including one where there's a sharp precipice on either side and no barriers.
Are you regulated to have full... Where are you in China right now in terms of your ability to offer that product, though? Understood.
Unsupervised. We have supervised full self-driving, where there's a person in the car. It has approval in China. But whenever we release a new version, we have to get an incremental approval. And at times, we do have to battle other car companies in China who are trying to stop us from
It's an incredibly competitive market.
China is the most competitive market.
At the extent BYD, which is neck and neck with you, I think, in the EV race, I think it's fair to say, worldwide, correct?
I don't really follow that.
Well, they're willing, again, my question is, they're willing to seemingly offer different levels of autonomy for, I don't want to call it free, but
I don't really think about competitors. I just think about making the product as perfect as possible.
You don't think about competitors at all?
But no, I just think about making, what we want to achieve is the platonic ideal of the perfect product. And as long as you focus on that, you will have a compelling product, obviously.
All right. Well, there's a potentially compelling product right behind you, which is the robo-taxi. So when are we, is in 5 years, are they going to be all over the place?
Yes.
They will. You're confident in that.
Yeah.
Talking about Tesla, obviously, takes me to a certain extent to what some would say is the brand damage done by your government service. I don't know if you would agree with that. There have been some pros and cons. We sat here 2 years ago upstairs, and you famously said, when I asked you about this very subject, I don't care. I'm going to say what I want to say, and so be it. Do you regret that? No. Why not?
I believe that we want to live in a free society where people are allowed to say what they want to say within reasonable bounds. Like, you can't advocate for the murder of somebody, but free speech is the bedrock of a functioning democracy. That's why it's the First Amendment.
Without a doubt. But I guess my question is more about your work at Doge, for example. Was that worth it? To the extent you are now, Elon, you were a somewhat divisive figure 2 years ago, but now you really are. I mean, there are people who love you, but there are a lot of people who dislike you, some of whom were your customers. And I wonder, was it worth the undertaking at Doge and everything else that you've done and how outspoken you've been in terms of the things you believe in to antagonize so many potential buyers and or users of things like a robo-taxi?
Unfortunately, what I've learned is that legacy media propaganda is very effective at making people believe things that aren't true.
An example of that being?
That I'm a Nazi. And how many legacy media publications, talk shows, whatever, try to claim that I was a Nazi because of some random hand gesture at a rally where all I said was that my heart goes out to you, and I was talking about space travel. And yet the legacy media promoted that as though that was a deliberate Nazi gesture, when in fact every politician, any public speaker who's spoken for any length of time has made the exact same gesture. And yet there's still people out there, and I've never harmed a single person.
Listen, you know what, Elon? I wasn't
now,
even
you asked for an example.
I wasn't even going to talk to you about it, because in fact, I have a number of people who are close to you, and I called them afterwards, and all of them to a person were like, no way. No way.
Of course not.
But that isn't necessarily the perception. The work you've done for Doge has also come obviously into the spotlight in a great deal. And people are upset about USAID being put into the wood chipper. People are upset about AmeriCorps disappearing. People are upset about, and this isn't even on your side, the NIH and so many other areas that they feel rightly or wrongly are being cut as a result of your efforts. And I guess I wonder, as you start to transition now back to Tesla in a more significant way.
Any program in USAID that had any semblance of merit was retained and folded into the State Department. So, and if there's some exception to that, we're all ears and we'd love to look at it. We just want to see the evidence that the program was actually doing good and not just funding graft in DC and warlords in some country. Because over and over again, we saw sympathetic sounding programs.
Right.
But when we actually said, well, please show us pictures of the recipients of the aid, or let us get into contact with them. No pictures were forthcoming. They didn't give us any contact information. And we're like, look, we're not going to send money to DC grafters and warlords. That's not a good use of money. So that's not what we're going to do. Now, invariably, when you stop waste and fraud, it's not like the fraudsters admit their guilt. They don't say like, oh, isn't it so great that the money we were getting, fortunately, has been stopped. They will obviously come up with a sympathetic sounding claim. That claim has no merit.
I guess what I would come back to, because I talk about economics all day long, is, to your point that you've been making, we have a deficit that's running at about 6.7% of GDP.
Right.
We have interest costs that are going to be above $1 trillion. It's not going down next year. You entered this thinking you could cut as much as $1 trillion. You're nowhere near that. It's not really making the dent I think you may have thought you might have been able to achieve in terms of a true problem. Would you agree?
Well, first of all, it would obviously be ridiculous to assume that we could achieve that on day one. So it's only been, 4 months?
Yeah.
And we've done, by our calculations, improved the deficit by $160 billion.
Right.
That's up,
That's your number that's out there. A lot of people take issue with it and say, well, taxpayers' expenses such as paid leave, that's $135 billion that's got to come back. IRS collection may go down as a result of cuts there. I asked Grok. It said between 5 and 32 billion is what you've actually said.
You need to ask, the right question to ask is, what is the bit for the actions of Doge?
Right.
What would the incremental expenditures be in FY26?
Yep.
Because, for example, we offered severance and early retirement to a lot of government employees. Many of them took us up on that. But that severance went all the way through to September.
Yeah.
So there's not going to be any savings until October.
Right.
Because the severance goes through September.
Understood.
So the delta really is, what is the spending difference FY25 versus FY26 as a function of Doge's actions. That's how we calculate the number. And we'll see if that turns out to be true or not.
I mean, by changing the retirement age or really going after some other parts of the budget?
We've tried to go after every part of the budget.
Yeah.
Some parts are more boring than others.
You're about efficiency. I mean, that would take an act of Congress, obviously, to really make change.
First of all, so I think, in our opinion, we've created a $160 billion delta, FY25 to FY26, very significant. That's 16% of the way towards $1 trillion in 5 months. And in order to make progress, we need the consent, obviously, of not just the executive branch, but also the legislative branch and the judicial branch. So if we, and we are advisors, we're not kings here.
I get it.
So why are you attacking this, given that we've made so much progress?
You mean not me. I'm not attacking. I'm just asking questions. Yeah. In fact, I want to ask a lot more about Tesla. I do want to talk about Tesla. I mean, I was talking about brand damage and what you're seeing in the market. You did an interview earlier this morning where you seem to indicate you're starting to see a rebound.
Yes.
Automotive revenue was down 20% last quarter. I think 50,000 fewer units were sold in the Q1 versus Q1 a year ago. What is giving you confidence in the automotive business? Or is it all about robo-taxis, as you've been saying, and people can't quite see them behind me, the robots as well?
Really, the only things that matter in the long term are autonomy and optimism. Those overwhelmingly dominate the future financial success of the company. As for Q1, we had a global factory changeover for the Model Y. So there's a new version of the Model Y that came out, which required a factory shutdown across the world. Model Y is the number one selling car of any kind on Earth.
I watched your presentation during your last, right here, I think.
It's number one selling car in the world. So, we can't make cars if the factories are retooling. So the right time to retool is the first quarter, since generally that's when the least demand occurs. But we've seen a major rebound in demand at this point. I feel comfortable.
Major rebound in demand.
Yeah.
Really believe you have seen that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, for most people,
right,
when you buy a product, how much do you care about the political views of the CEO? Or do you even know what they are?
You now have this combination of being a CEO and having a role as a government advisor. Tell me about your week. How does it work? What's the split of your time?
Well, I travel a lot. So I was in Silicon Valley yesterday morning. I was in LA yesterday evening. I'm in Austin right now. I'll be in DC tomorrow. I'll be there having dinner with the president tomorrow night, I believe. And then a whole bunch of cabinet secretary meetings, and then back to Silicon Valley on Thursday night.
You said a while ago that it's about 1 to 2 days a week on your government work?
Yeah, that's correct.
And what does that mean for your corporate life? Because if we start with Tesla, the company has suffered in recent months what you've called blowback. So what is your plan for turning that around, the declining sales picture? And by what stage do you think you're going to be able to turn it around?
Oh, it's already turned around.
Give me some evidence for that. I've just been looking at the sales figures for Europe in April, which show very significant declines in the big markets.
Europe is our weakest market. We're strong everywhere else. Now, our sales are doing well at this point. We don't anticipate any meaningful sales shortfall. The stock market recognizes that, since we're now back over $1 trillion in market cap. So clearly the market is aware of the situation. It's already turned around.
But sales still down compared to this time last year in Europe, okay? And
yes, but that's true of all manufacturers. There's no exceptions.
Okay, but you would acknowledge, wouldn't you, that what you are facing, and let's just take it as Europe, is a significant problem. Tesla was an incredibly aspirational brand. People identified with it. They saw it at the forefront of the climate crisis, and now people are driving around with stickers in their cars saying, I bought this before we knew Elon was crazy.
And there are also people who are buying it because Elon's crazy, or however they may view it. So yes, we've lost some sales perhaps on the left, but we've gained them on the right. The sales numbers at this point are strong, and we see no problem with demand.
So what?
And you can just look at the stock price. Stock market analysts have that. And our stock wouldn't be trading near all-time highs if things weren't in good shape. They're fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay. I was citing sales figures rather than share price. Well, tell me then how committed you are to Tesla. Do you see yourself being the chief executive of Tesla in 5 years' time?
Yes.
No doubt about that at all.
Well, No, I might die.
Short of that.
I can't be here if I'm dead. So there's a slight amount of time.
Does that mean that the value of your pay doesn't have any bearing on your decision?
Well, that's not really a subject of discussion in this forum. I think obviously there should be compensation for, if something incredible is done, that compensation should match that something incredible was done. I'm confident that whatever some activist posing as a judge in Delaware happens to do will not affect the future compensation.
This is the judge who twice struck down the $56 billion pay package that was awarded to you. I think the value on the current value of stock options. Yeah.
Not a judge. The activist who is cosplaying a judge in a Halloween costume.
The current value of stock options, I think the value of that pay package stands at about $100 billion. Are you saying you are relaxed about the value of your future pay package? Your decision to be committed to Tesla for the next 5 years, as long as you are still with us on this planet, is completely independent of pay?
No.
It's not independent. So pay is a relevant factor then to your commitment to Tesla.
There's sufficient voting control such that I cannot be ousted by activist investors is what matters to me. And I've said this publicly many times. But let's not have this whole thing be a discussion of my alleged pay. It's not a money thing. It's a reasonable control thing over the future of the company, especially if we're building millions, potentially billions of humanoid robots. I can't be sitting there and one day get tossed out for political reasons by activists. That would be unacceptable. That's all that matters. Now let's move on.
Okay. Well, just one question.
Let's move on.
Well, one question before we move on to other companies, which is that I wonder if some of what has happened to Tesla in the last few months, did you take it personally?
Yes.
And did it make you regret or think twice about your political endeavors? Because I
did what needed to be done. The violent antibody reaction, and I'm not someone who's ever committed violence, and yet massive violence was committed against my companies. Massive violence was threatened against me. Who are these people? Why would they do that? How wrong can they be? They're on the wrong side of history. And that's an evil thing to do. To go and damage some poor innocent person's car, to threaten to kill me. What's wrong with these people? I've not harmed anyone. So something needs to be done about them. And a number of them are going to prison, and they deserve it. And more will.
You're referring to the attacks on Tesla showrooms, but I think
firing bullets into showrooms and burning down cars is unacceptable.
Yeah.
Those people will go to prison, and the people that funded them and organized them will also go to prison. Don't worry.
But wouldn't you acknowledge that some of the people who turned against Tesla in Europe were upset at your politics, and very few of them would have been violent in any way. They just objected to what they saw you say or do politically.
Well, it's certainly fine to object to political things, but it's not fine to resort to violence and hanging someone in effigy and death threats. That is in no way justifiable at all, in any way, shape, or form. And some of the legacy media nonetheless have sought to justify it, which is unconscionable. Shame on them.
Let's talk about your other companies then and other business areas, SpaceX. I saw that you said in a speech at the West Point Military Academy recently that the future of warfare is AI and drones. And obviously defense is an increasingly booming sector with the state of the world at the moment. Do you see SpaceX moving into weaponized drones?
You certainly ask interesting questions that are impossible to answer. So SpaceX it's the space launch leader. So SpaceX doesn't do drones. SpaceX builds rockets, satellites, and internet terminals. So SpaceX has a very dominant position in space launch. So of the mass launch to orbit this year, SpaceX will probably do 90%. China will do the remaining amount, so 5%, and the rest of the world, including the rest of the US, will do about 5%. So SpaceX will do about 10 times as much as the rest of the world combined, or 20 times as much as China, and China is doing actually a very impressive job. The reason for this is that we are putting into orbit the largest satellite constellation the world has ever seen by far. So I think at this point, about maybe approaching 80% of all active satellites in orbit are SpaceX. And they're providing high bandwidth global connectivity throughout the world. In fact, this connection is on a SpaceX connection. So I think this is a very good thing because it means that we can provide low-cost, high-bandwidth internet to parts of the world that don't have it or where it's very expensive. And I think the single biggest thing you can do to lift people out of poverty and help them is giving them an internet connection. Because once you have the internet connection, you can learn anything for free on the internet. And you can also sell your goods and services to the global market. Once you have knowledge by the internet and the ability to engage in commerce, this is going to greatly improve quality of life for people throughout the world. And I'd just like to thank anyone in the audience who may have been helpful with Starlink and getting it approved in their country. I think it's doing a lot of good on the countries that have approved it, which is, I think at this point, 130 countries are very happy with it. I don't currently anticipate SpaceX getting into the weapons business. It's not an aspiration. We're frequently asked to do weapons programs, but we have just declined.
Do you envisage SpaceX or indeed Starlink as a separate entity publicly listing in the near future or at all?
It's possible that Starlink may go public at some point in the future.
And what would be the time frame? What kind of time frame are you considering?
No rush. The public is, I guess, a way to potentially make more money, but at the expense of a lot of public company overhead and inevitably a whole bunch of lawsuits, which are very annoying. So really something needs to be done about the shareholder derivative lawsuits in the US, because it allows plaintiffs' law firms who don't represent the shareholders to pretend that they represent the shareholders by getting a puppet plaintiff with a few shares to initiate a massive lawsuit against the company. And the irony being that, extreme irony, that even if the class they purport to represent were to vote that they don't want the lawsuit would still continue. So how can it be a class action representing a class if the class vote against it? It's a dire need of reform. As anyone who's run a public company experienced this, it's an absurd situation that needs to change.
Well, do you think Donald Trump might change it? You've certainly got his ear. I imagine that you've put this to him. Is this something you're trying to change before any Starlink IPO?
Well, it would need a law to be passed. The trouble being that you need 60% of votes, and the Democrats will vote against it. The plaintiff's bar is, I believe, the second largest contributor to the Democratic Party. That's the issue. At the state level, this can be solved. And I should say, Texas recently passed a law which, at least at the state level, made lawsuits much more reasonable, because you have to get at least 1 in 33 shareholders to agree that they are part of a class of shareholders. 3%. This will really help with lawsuits.
Farzad and I literally just got done editing our reaction, which you're about to see in a moment. And Elon has just jumped on CNBC for yet another interview. Make sure you stay tuned for it. It's coming at the end of this video. And I tell you now, it's a banger of a segment. Let's start with CNBC. Massive interview. What were your biggest takeaways?
Yeah, I think what was interesting about that interview was we're on the cusp of Tesla releasing robotaxi and releasing the self-driving stuff finally in Austin. And so the confirmation we got from that interview, which I think was sort of like pointed towards, it was pointed towards this happening, is unsupervised FSD, meaning that in Austin, they're going to have a small region of Austin. In that same interview, Elon said specifically, it's going to be 10 to 20 cars, which we knew, but it's going to be geofence, which we assumed, right? And it's going to be a geofence to the quote unquote safest roads they can find. And for the first week or two, was some of the things that I heard on that interview, was that we're going to start with a 10 to 20, and it's going to be unsupervised. There will be no driver behind the steering wheel. So it's going to be like a legit Waymo. And they want to start small and then get much bigger. Now, that's not super new information. The unsupervised piece, where there's not going to be nobody behind the driver's seat, is the newest piece of information we got. And then the sort of the way that Tesla and Elon have thought about the ramp of the robotaxi network, going from those 10 to 20 to, by the end of next year, 1 million self-driving Teslas on the road, right? Which the clarification was, if you own a Tesla, you'll be able to go from point A to point B without paying attention. That doesn't necessarily mean like actual robo-taxis that are part of the Tesla network, but could just be people owning the Teslas with unsupervised. And you can see just the companies going all in on this. The stock was rising as Elon was talking about robo-taxi and unsupervised, which I think reinforces the whole thought process that the market is now viewing Tesla as an AI play, not as a your car sales play, right? And on that same interview, Elon was talking about, or the interviewer Faber was asking him about demand, so on and so forth. We got a reconfirmation of it, which was also said on the Bloomberg interview with that super hostile interviewer, that from Elon's perspective, demand is fine. There's a big rebound. Whatever brand damage was there, we saw, they saw the opposite from the other side. The Republicans are buying more, whereas the Democrats didn't. There's still softness in Europe, but the justification there was, well, the entire car market is soft. It's not just Tesla. But you can see that the company is working very strongly and very much trying to tell the market and the customer base that, guys, we're going towards self-driving. Like, we're now at self-driving. And this is going to start next month. Y'all will see. And the companies, Elon specifically, seems very confident that the speed of how quickly they'll be able to expand the network will surprise people, which has been the thesis behind Tesla's methodology from the very beginning, because they're not using HT maps, etc. So that was my biggest takeaway, is that unsupervised is legit. It's going to happen next month. And now the thing to look out for is the speed of expansion.
Elon confirmed that there wasn't going to be a safety driver in the car. I think you had predicted that. How does that make you think about how this is going to scale as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's the holy grail. So that's such a good question, because what that implies is doesn't have safety drivers right now in places like Austin, in places like San Francisco, right? But Waymo's biggest bottleneck is they can't really expand quickly. They are expanding, but they're still in a handful of cities. It might be in 10 cities by the end of next year, right? But they've been on the roads for how many years? Since like 2017, 2018. Incredible technology, right? So, but that's one limitation. They can't expand quickly, which is also limited by how many cars they have. Waymo has 1,200 cars operational, right? And they're going to make another 2,000 next year. Every Tesla car coming off the line right now, if Tesla's right about FSD being the thing, right, being truly unsupervised, they're making 1.82 million cars per year equivalent of what Waymo's producing. It's just the technology they're using is different, right? So if they put those cars on the road, and then all of a sudden they go from 10 to 20 to say 100 or 500 or 1,000 units relatively quickly, and it goes from downtown Austin to greater Austin to suburbs of Austin to metro Austin to, okay, now we're going to go to Dallas and San Antonio. Oh, and now we're going to go to the entire state of Texas. In addition to their existing cars having unsupervised FSD, where you're still behind the steering wheel and pedal, but now you can take your eyes off the road and be a level 3 instead of a level 4. Those two things are the separating the factor between them and everybody else. And so if they're able to get there quickly, then that validates the thesis. And that's where the market should recognize Tesla as the only player, because technology is one piece, solving the self-driving is one piece, which Waymo has done phenomenally, but the scale is a significantly bigger piece, right? It's like, oh, I can make the best robot vacuum in the world, okay? Or I can make the greatest dishwasher in the world, or the greatest whatever in the world, right? But if you can only make one, or you make 100, that limits you. And if somebody else is like, yo, I can sell the same thing you just made, but I can make 1 million of those, who's going to win? It's the one that's going to make 1 million of those. And so that's the Tesla thesis. It's like they think they can do it at millions of units per year. And then the expansion in Austin will tell us everything, especially with unsupervised.
Taking all that into consideration, when is this like going to be a proper wake-up call for the rest of auto? With the charging standard, the North American charging standard, it's like nobody was in on it. And then in a 6-month period, it was a tidal wave. Everyone was in on it. When is it going to be everyone is in on licensing FSD and the technology from Tesla? Because it's the holy grail and it is undeniable.
When it's too late. Obviously. When it's too late. I mean, this is just Innovator's Dilemma 14.0. How many times has this happened in the past, right? The culture at a lot of these automakers is not equipped to go all in on a technology that they view as novel. These are not risk-taking companies. Toyota, GM, Ford, all these guys, they're not going to make the bet, let's say, that says they obviously have this figured out. It's just a matter of time for the neural networks to catch up to the capability and for them to get approval to go bigger and bigger and bigger. Because that requires a level of understanding of the core technologies and having an executive group that's willing to take a risk on that technology. These boards and these executive teams are not designed to understand artificial intelligence and technology. They're designed to understand supply chains and manufacturing for legacy auto processes and to ensure that the investor base is getting their dividends and their buybacks so they don't revolt and they don't get their amazing pay compensations like plummeting because somehow this company has taken this massive risk and they're putting all this capex in this technology. And let's say they misexecute, then all of a sudden, all these guys are going to start selling the stock and then these executives are not going to be able to get paid. It's just, they're not designed to execute on this, right? And so the companies that are willing to take a risk and go with the technology that is obviously superior, but perhaps is unproven, but the pathway is obvious that that technology will win in the end, those are the companies that will win. Hyundai seems to be like a ballsy legacy auto company. Ford in the US, to me, is by far the most capable of understanding that. Jim Farley, I think, is one of the more forward-thinking CEOs out there for legacy auto. So maybe there is something there. I don't see GM doing it. I don't see Toyota doing it. I don't see Honda doing it. Nissan's probably going to go bankrupt first, honestly, out of all the legacy automakers. The European guys forget it. I mean, with your British accent, we can tell that you're from that, part of the world. That was the worst British accent ever. But like, there's a culture of not taking risks when it comes to these novel state-of-the-art technologies because the companies are just not designed to do that. So it's going to be new players. And it's the Chinese, of course. It's going to be Chinese and Tesla. And like a handful of legacy automakers that are actually willing to take a risk.
So on a different note, both CNBC and Bloomberg both asked Elon today if his Doge effort, if his political effort, if it's been worth it. What don't they understand? What doesn't legacy media understand about Elon? The fact that they keep asking this kind of question to him.
Because it's an incredible headline, right? It's an incredible headline. Most richest, most powerful individual on the planet destroys company because he's a Nazi. Come on, bro. Like, how is that not the greatest clickbait title of all time, right? Now, on the flip side, it is legitimate that there are people out there, like the framing is, I think it's sensationalized, but the core of the argument, I think, is valid, which is Elon's involvement in politics and his outspoken nature has alienated people on one side of the political spectrum. But what doesn't, and that becomes a phenomenal question to ask, because I think first order thinking about this is like, of course you're going to alienate some customers, right? If it gets big enough, right? But the question becomes, what percentage of those people are truly alienated, right? Like, what are the metrics being used here to understand what percentage of the total TAM doesn't give a shit? And what percentage of the opposite side is actually now being brought forward to this, right? And being like, holy shit, I didn't consider Tesla before. I like what Elon's doing, right? The Republican Party has a better approval rating than the Democrat Party by like 10, 15, 20 points, if we want to talk about politics, okay? Trump's approval rating is like 47%. The Democrat Party is like 32%, okay? So if you're thinking about it from a raw numbers perspective and a TAM perspective, I would make the argument that him picking the side that's more popular is probably a good long-term decision, right? But ultimately, the argument that probably makes most sense, which I don't think Elon is capable of doing because he's just so willing to speak his mind and he's not going to compromise for it. That's what you get with that CEO. So it is what it is, right? Just why are you out there doing, why are you out there creating hoopla, right? But the same mad brain that creates the Tesla and the SpaceX and the Neuralink, that same mad brain is going to behave how he behaves with politics. And it's all about what he believes are existential things that are happening in society. And he views himself as somebody that can help fix those existential things, and that by default is going to make him a very polarizing figure. He's going to have people that absolutely adore him and he's going to have people that absolutely hate him, right? Now he's reached peak like popularity. 80% of the world that is online and follows this stuff knows who that is by far. Like he's basically a household name at this point, I would say. And so for the coming years, that popularity is not going to really increase that much more. It's just going to be like, okay, who's going to go to each side? Are we going to have people that hate him, that are not going to love him? Other people that love him, that are not going to hate him, right? And so from his perspective, it's just going to be like, I think, based on the interviews, is like, he's not going to spend nearly as much on politics, which is what he said. He's like, hey, my job here is done. I got the intended outcome. I feel like civilization's on a good path, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just going to now go back to focusing on my technologies, right? So, and it continues executing on those things, and the robotaxi ends up being a hit, and everyone's Tesla can drive itself, and the bot ends up being incredible, and Starship goes to Mars, and Starlink is freaking everywhere, and Neuralink's going, helping thousands of people a year to regain movement and eyesight. In due time, but I think in the end, when you think about the total TAM of Tesla and transportation, this is nothing. It's short-term noise, however valid it may be. If you have a long enough time scale, as long as you execute on the technology, no one's going to give a shit. That's my take.
So I feel like in the Bloomberg interview today, we kind of had a Don Lemon 2.0, and she hit just all those classic headlines. I've got a few of them here. It's the Tesla sales, the tanking, Elon Musk on his commitment to Tesla, his schedule, is he able to even give Tesla the time it's deserved? OpenAI came up in the legal battle there. SpaceX.
She's like 6 months late.
Yeah, she is very late. SpaceX's legal hiring issues. What else have we got here?
So even lazy.
Something which is up to date. These racism laws and issues in South Africa, which really got Elon fired up.
Yeah.
Bill Gates even came up with USAID. How successful was she on her hit piece against Elon Musk?
I think it made Elon look better, and of course I'm biased, right? So take what I say with a grain of salt. But it reminded me of the Andrew Sorkin interview with New York Times where Elon was like, GFY, go fuck yourself. And I thought Andrew carried that interview excellently. I thought that was an excellent interview, like a very good interview. Because it wasn't combative. It was like, let's talk about the issues. This woman, to me, came across very combative, right? And she was trying to mask it as, I'm just asking you a question. No, you're not. Like you're trying to get something out of this. You're trying to get that headline so you can run on it, right? It created for banger content. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, we're talking about it. It obviously worked. But like, we know what's going on, right? So yeah, I thought it made Elon look good in that perspective. I think it continues to highlight the poor state of legacy media, where their job is not doing investigative journalists. It's in journalism. It's like, okay, let me find the most clickbaity thing that has happened with that story, and I'm going to ask for a reaction. That's all she did. This is not journalism. This is not any better than what I do on YouTube, some idiot rando just talking about shit. This woman's literally doing the same exact thing. Worse, right? Because at least I'm trying to give some insight. She's just like, okay, this clickbaity thing happened. What's your response? Do you agree with that? Why are you so bad at, why do you hate black people in South Africa? Right? It's crazy to me. It highlights that again, from my perspective. I think people that hate Elon will look at that video and be like, oh, finally, somebody's out there holding truth to power and all that stuff. But these are topics that are not new. They've been discussed. It's out there. And I don't think there's much that is gained from a substance perspective to do that. But from a content perspective, it's amazing. Pros and cons, right? And like Don Lemon, again, the Don Lemon interview, like everybody was talking about it. Did it make Don Lemon look worse? 100% my opinion, but we talked about it. So anyway, that's what I think about that.
Your goal, you've also said, is to produce 1 million robots, I think by 2030. That's what I had you on the record as saying.
I think that's a reasonable target.
And then start towards sustainable abundance, which you can get into. But, I wonder, we've been talking about autonomous and how long it takes to train the automobile to be able to exceed human capabilities. But what about these robots, to the extent that how much training are they going to need to actually to be able to do various different types of tasks? Is that a long time?
It's going to take a lot of compute resources. And it'll take time. I think there's certain threshold breakthroughs that we think we can achieve, where if Optimus can watch videos, YouTube videos or how-to videos or whatever, and based on that video, just like a human can, learn how to do that thing, then you really have task extensibility that is dramatic, because then it can learn anything very quickly. So I think we'll get there in the next. We're not there yet.
Relying on a significant uptick in terms of learning and training.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm calling it a very significant threshold. Would be the ability to learn from watching a video. Just so
right.
But at the point,
as opposed to watching a human, right? Which is, or having a human sort of train it right now.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're training Optimus to do like primitive tasks where a human in a kind of a what's called a mocap suit and sort of cameras on the head is moving in the way that the robot would move to, say, pick up an object or open a door, the basic tasks, throw a ball, dance. And I think that's needed to sort of bootstrap the intelligence so you can have the basic functions. then where I think it gets very interesting, and very much like humans, is that you want the robot to self-play. Right. So you say, how does a child learn? Well, a child has toys, and a child plays with the toys, plays with the blocks, at some point figures out how to put the triangle in the triangle hole and the circle in the circle hole by doing it over and over again. And this self-play, once you have a lot of robots, you can do this self-play, which is that you just put the robot in a room with toys and have the robot play with toys.
And it will learn.
Yeah, and you have a reward function, say like, okay, the goal of the robot is to put, that classic child's toy, you put the circle in the circle hole, the square, square hole, triangle, triangle hole, and keep doing it until it works. And the reward function is succeeding.
And there are no advances needed to accomplish that? No advances in AI or compute and things of that nature that can happen?
There are some advances needed, but I don't think these are insurmountable. I think we can solve these things in the next few years.
Okay, so at that time when millions of these things are coming off a line like we just saw with cars, they're going to be fully autonomous. They're going to come off and the way you've described it, they're going to be able to come at my house and I'm going to be able to say, all right, do the dishes. Now I need you to walk the dog.
Absolutely.
Hold the baby.
In fact, you really won't even need to, it'll figure out what you probably want and do what you probably want without you even having to ask.
How many GPUs are you going to need for that?
Well, quite a few GPUs. We do have our own program called Dojo for training, which I think will be helpful.
That's contributing about 5% towards self-driving, right?
Yeah.
Is that the one in New York, in New York State?
Yeah, it's in New York. So we expect to still buy a lot of GPUs from NVIDIA, some from AMD and maybe from others. And as long as NVIDIA is better than what we make, we'll keep buying from NVIDIA.
Is that the case right now?
It is.
Yeah. I mean, you're obviously buying them for XAI, the Memphis, big time, right?
Yeah, XAI is building the most powerful, I think we have the most powerful training cluster in the world right now, which is over 200,000 GPUs training coherently.
You're at 200,000 already now.
Yes.
There in Memphis, that facility okay.
Yes.
And where are you going?
And we'll be at the million GPU level in the location just near Memphis.
1 million GPUs for a new location or 800,000 additional GPUs?
1 million of the next generation GPUs.
So Blackwell?
Well, yeah.
Wait, are you building that now?
Yeah.
How are you powering
It's a gigawatt class system. Yeah.
You do? Natural.
But it is a hard problem.
Which is the hard problem? Finding the power.
Getting a gigawatt online.
Yeah.
And actually having the gigawatts of power be reliable, because you get the power fluctuations in the grid and that whatnot. So we're using, actually I just posted something online today, which is a whole bunch of Tesla Megapacks batteries that are important for power conditioning the grid. So the GPUs do not like power fluctuations. They like it power steady. And then if sometimes there's slight brownouts or if there's a blackout, you want to be able to carry through that like an uninterruptible power supply. So we've got a lot of Megapacks there to
support that.
It'll be the first gigawatt class training cluster in the world and the most powerful training cluster.
When's that going to be done?
Hopefully in about 6 months, maybe 9 months.
Mm-hmm. And that's largely powering Grok.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just powering Grok.
Right, which continues to advance. I mean, I use it frequently.
Yeah.
I saw you using that on the Joe, was it with Rogan, when you were using that mode? What is that mode where it's all sassy and curses all the time?
Well, if you want to have fun at parties, Grok unhinged mode is pretty funny.
Yeah.
It's next level.
Is power going to be the gating issue for our ability to continue to advance in AI?
Yeah, I think a few years ago, I made a very obvious prediction, which is that the limitation on AI will be chips, and it's still kind of chips today. Then it will be electrical equipment because you need to take power that might be at 300,000 volts all the way down to 400 volts for the computer. So you need step-down transformers and a lot of them, and a lot of cabling and wiring and fuses and it's a lot of transformers essentially, and the electrical transformer industry is not used to big changes in demand.
No, there's a shortage of transformers.
There literally is a shortage of transformers, and then funnily enough, the AI algorithm is called a transformer, and then our Optimus robot is named after Optimus Prime. That's a transformer robot.
It's a lot.
So we have transformers for transformers.
Right. But it's the one transformer is the one in shortage that the others need.
And then as we solve the transformer shortage, there will be the fundamental electricity generation shortage.
And are we there yet, or are we going to be there soon?
We're getting there soon. My guess is people will start hitting challenges with power generation maybe by middle of next year, end of next year.
Even with deregulation and effort being made to perhaps move permits along more quickly.
You have to say, like, how many power plants are getting built and how fast can you build a power plant?
Right. China seems to be building them pretty quickly.
China has so many power plants that have been built and are being built. I don't think people quite realize this. I posted on my X account just the graph of U.S. power generation versus China power generation. And China power generation is like a rocket going to orbit, and the U.S. power generation is flat.
Right.
So I think by the end of this year, China will have about 2.5 times the power output of the United States, and it's headed towards maybe 3 or 4 times the power output of the United States.
Yeah, it's funny when I think about China. I mean, EVs, autonomous, we talked about batteries, solar, power generation. By the way, even biotechnology recently, I don't know if you saw Pfizer's licensing cancer drugs. Are they ahead of us in certain areas that are important?
The United States still has an advantage in breakthrough innovation, and I think it's somewhat of a cultural thing, which is that to have breakthrough innovation, you have to question authority. Fundamentally, your breakthrough, you're questioning the conventional wisdom when you do a breakthrough innovation.
Right.
In China, they don't generally like to question the authority, or that's not as encouraged as it is in the U.S. So
you seem to be good at finding something and then making it better.
Yeah, I do want to emphasize that the sheer number of smart, talented people in China who work very hard is amazing. The amount of talent. I mean, I'm an admirer of China's capabilities. I think most people outside of China do not understand the power of China. It really is something special.
Yeah. In the time we have left, I would like to sort of keep the focus on XAI. First of all, you spoke earlier about wanting more control at Tesla. Would you ever consider merging XAI into Tesla? It would be a way, obviously, they could issue shares to you and conceivably would increase your overall economics. Is that a possibility?
Well, I guess anything's possible, but it would be difficult to speculate about something. Tesla's a publicly traded stock.
I would think to get a majority of the minority vote or whatever you might need might be not easy.
Yeah. It's not out of the question, but that would have to be something that the Tesla shareholders would want to vote for. So.
Understood. But it's not something you're thinking about doing.
It's not currently, there are no plans to do so.
Right.
It's not out of the question, but obviously would require Tesla shareholder support for that.
Another way you could obviously increase your control would be to get that comp plan passed in Delaware, or through the Delaware Supreme Court, or a new one. You haven't been paid, I believe, since 2018.
Yeah.
Where are you
7 years.
Where are you on?
7 years with zero pay,
Although, to be fair, if it goes through, you're going to have an enormous payday. It'll be fine. It'll be more money than anybody's ever made.
I suppose so. But I mean, let's just say that if any CEO of the Fortune 500 were to agree to a plan like the one that I agreed to, you should buy the stock of that company immediately.
No, I remember at the time. Yeah. Fair, the targets were so far above where the stock was, and obviously they were met.
Yes.
Is the board working, to your knowledge, on another potential plan if, in fact, the one never gets out of Delaware, the Supreme Court rules against the chancellor's ruling?
I mean, I don't want to speak on behalf of the board, but I'm sure it's on their mind. But I can't comment on Tesla board deliberations.
You said earlier, I mean, you want to stay as CEO. Why not? I've wondered, Elon, given all the heat you've gotten in a lot of ways, why not sort of become like an Ellison-like figure at Tesla? Obviously, you're a lot younger, but still, he's very influential at Oracle. But, he's not CEO and he doesn't get the attention, at least not in title.
I think maybe a better term for, I'm a huge fan of Larry Ellison, he's a good friend of mine. Owner, I think would be,
yes.
He's the owner of Oracle.
Yes, he is. And he has a lot of it.
Yeah.
Finally, I want to...
So the CEO, he's just the owner.
Yeah. It's a big percentage, a lot higher than yours, actually, at Tesla.
Yes, an impressive percentage at Oracle.
Finally, so many things we haven't gotten to, but we're trying to keep to your time. Are we ready for the changes that AI is going to bring to this society? I try my job every day to sort of follow them. Obviously, they've been pushed aside to a certain extent by issues of the day.
Yeah.
It's coming fast. And
it's coming very fast. I mean, I feel like we're in the big bang of the intelligence explosion. Like we have courtside seats to the big bang of intelligence explosion. One thing's for sure, it won't be boring.
No.
So if
you don't seem to be saying there's a 20% chance of annihilation as often anymore.
I think we should always consider that there's some chance of a bad outcome to try to protect against the bad outcomes. We don't want to be complacent and say that everything's just going to be fine. There's no chance of a bad outcome. I sort of think of this maybe in movie terms as like, are we in a Star Trek movie or are we in a Gene Roddenberry movie or a James Cameron movie? Which movie are we in here? And if you could either have a Roddenberry or a Cameron outcome. I think in this case, we want the Roddenberry outcome.
Yeah. And the abundance that may come with it. You're going to miss the White House at all or not?
My rough plan on the White House is to be there for a couple days every few weeks.
Yeah.
And to be helpful where I can be helpful.